What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another Q&A interaction. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope your past week was fine. Hope everybody's up in spirits. I hope life is treating you well. Some good questions this week, so let's jump right in, alright? First question. What is the most important thing to know in chromatic jazz harmony? Well, that's a really good question, and I've talked about somewhat this a lot. You know, a little pet peeve of mine when people talk about atonal music as it's chromatic music, and it's not, right? So when you approach like chromatic jazz harmony or chromatic melodic lines, I think one of the most important things to do is realize that you're not just playing anything you want, and there's actually purpose to the tones, right? So if you're crafting, if you're playing over a jazz chord progression, you're gonna target chord tones and specific intervals, right? Specific extensions. So as you create those melodies and as you create those runs, you can fill in the gaps, so to speak, or fill in the blanks with the chromatic notes, with the notes that you're not playing, right? You know, so if you're playing frets 4, 6, 7 on the guitar, you can play 4, 5, 6, 7, right? That's a nice chromatic approach. And there's a lot of cliche lines for a reason, you know, like descending from this note, the 7th to the 5th, so I can play a chromatic line there, or a chromatic line up to the 5th. The point is that you always want to lead your chromaticism to a specific target note, right? That has purpose of overall the chord progression. It's not just play whatever you want. There's a time and place for that, and that has a certain rhythmic and harmonic distortion that kind of goes on to create tension. But when it comes to like chromatic jazz harmony, you don't want to do that. Or at least with crafting melody ideas, and when you're connecting like chords ideas, a lot of times you can create chromatic lines through inversions and substitutions, right? And I don't want to get too heavy in that because you said the most important thing. Not the most important thing, but it's just important to realize that when you start adding chromaticism into your melody lines, there's a purpose to it, and there's a technique to it, and you're not playing whatever you want. You want to create those chromatic lines to lead you to either target notes or tension notes, and then resolve those. Right? So having a good idea of how to build chords and what notes you're targeting over a chord progression would probably help a lot. Cool, great question. Given the opportunity to pick any 5 musicians to make the ultimate band, what would you choose? Wow, how can you even choose? Let's have some fun. Let's do Jaco on bass, Bach on the keyboard, Marco Minimum on the drums, Andy Timmons on guitar, and Frank Sinatra singing. Huh? That'd be a fun little project. No? No. I think if I can go back in time and be any musician, it might be Frank Sinatra, right? Just living it up, Vegas, singing, cocktail songs. I don't know. Seems like a good time. People that talk about tone are retarded. Wait, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. I was listening to my music on these free earbud speakers. They sound so good. Did I ever tell you about how good my laptop speaker sounds? Pfft, amazing. Where should I start learning scales and theory? I've been playing for 14 years and just never had lessons. I feel like learning all that I could about them would make me more confident with improv. Most of your scale talk is over my head, but within my playing ability, I have the hands, just not the smarts. That's a really good question, and a lot of people, including myself, we all kind of struggle with that, right? So music theory is such a broad term. You know, it's just like a big the broadest brushstroke you can have. Right? Music theory. That's like saying, I want to learn math. It's like, alright, well, what kind of math do you want to learn? What kind of math do you need to learn? Right? What kind of math is going to make you a better mathematician and do your job better? Right? So the same kind of thing applies to guitar and applying music theory, because one has nothing to do with the other. You can pick up a guitar and play and learn all these songs, all your favorite songs, and none of that really has to do with music theory. Right? Music theory is more of a general sense, and it applies to every instrument regardless of what it is, okay? So where to start with learning scales and all that stuff? Well, I think that you should apply scales to chords, right? Just like I talked about applying modes to chords. They are literally the same thing, right? So if I play a certain scale or a certain mode, as I run up and down it, it's gonna give you the sound of a certain chord quality. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, try it and you'll see. Alright? So if you want to play a minor chord, you have multiple scales. Okay? So that's neither here nor there. So where do you start, right? Obviously having a good idea of pentatonic scales and how they work, and then you can add intervals to that. Right? So if I'm playing if you're comfortable with and familiar with the sound of pentatonic, then you're going to be able to say something with the pentatonic scale. Right? So if you're comfortable with that, that's fine. Learn the intervals so you can relate them to the chords, so you know what notes you're playing. That will help craft melody and improv a lot and give you a better understanding of the connections on the fretboard. I would break the boxes in half, right? Rather than learning vertically up and down 5 boxes, I would learn how to play the pentatonic scale in 1 octave pattern. So there's only 2 of them, and then when you look at the pentatonic boxes, you can basically chop each one in half and you see that 1 octave pattern. And that really helps as you're just playing ideas, and if you know the intervals that you're playing at the same time, and you can visualize the scale pattern or that octave pattern really fast, then you can bust that out. And you don't have to think about, I'm in this position, I can only play my scale this way. Right? That's frustrating and limiting. You know, and that's another thing that when it comes to improv is the problem is choice, right? It's like, here, play whatever you want. Well, all of a sudden you have no idea, right? You go to the ice cream store, it's like, we have 55 flavors of ice cream. Pick one. It's like, dude, I don't know. That's so good, right? So when it comes to practicing your improv, try to create limitation practices, right? I can only play in this position. I can only play these string sets, right? Stuff like that. And that really enhances your creativity, given the fact that you're very limited on what you can do with it. So you have to experiment with your creativity. Try to come up with different rhythms, right? Different patterns, stuff like that. So that really helps too. So I would just try to pick a chord and find what scale makes the sound of that chord, and then obviously learn your arpeggios and your scale patterns, and then practice moving that to another chord and keep it the same. Right? If you're playing 1 minor chord, just find another minor chord that sounds good with it and do the same thing. Right? And then you can expand for whatever chords you like the most. Alright? So that does it this week, guys. Awesome questions as always. Leave your theory questions, your life questions, whatever you want to talk about down in the description below. We'll talk about it down there. Maybe we'll talk about it on the videos. Right? And as always, let me know what you come up with. So until then, I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.